All right. Welcome, everybody, back to the Gnomon stream. I am your host, Adam Hartel, and I want to welcome you to today's first ever of this particular series of Instructor Spotlights that we're going to be doing. We're going to be spending about an hour together with Damon Woods, who is a principal character artist at Respawn Entertainment. We're going to be talking about his artistic journey. We're going to be talking about how he found his way into what he's doing for his part of the pipeline in the industry, as well as his class that he teaches here at Gnomon. So if you're curious about these amazing industry professionals that we have teaching our courses at Gnomon and what it would be like, what you could expect going into a class at Gnomon, this is your chance to ask one of our instructors questions, to hear about how they approach things, and most importantly, to hear from a current industry artist about what the current state of the industry is and their role today. So I'm really excited for this interview. Before I introduce our guest, I'd just like to mention a couple of things. We are streaming live, of course, on Twitch, also on YouTube, as well as Facebook. And if you are in need of closed captioning today, that is going to be available on our Facebook live feed. So if you need that, my colleague will drop a link in the chat and let you know how to get there. In addition, today's stream will also be available as video on demand on both the Twitch and YouTube channels for Gnomon. So with that out of the way, guys, I want to also mention that my colleague, Xander, who's in the chat today, Xander is also an admissions advisor at Gnomon. I'll be talking a little bit after our time with Damon about what that means and how our advisors are more like coaches. But Xander is available to answer any questions that you have about Gnomon, about our classes. If you want to know how to get in touch with Gnomon for some free pre-application portfolio coaching, that's one of the services we do for artists here at Gnomon. We want to take all the guesswork out of questions like, am I ready? What do I need to do to get ready to attend Gnomon? We want to help you with that. So Xander's here for you. And with that, I would like to introduce our guest. So Damon Woods. Hey, Damon, great to see you.
What's going on?
Welcome to the stream. So I'm going to read your bio really quick. Normally I read the bio before you guys are on, so just soak it up. It's all good. Don't be too humble, because you've got a great bio that I'm going to head through today. So Damon is a principal character artist at Respawn Entertainment, and for the last 10 years, you have been a 3D character artist for film, games, television, and advertising. Damon has exhibited great versatility in his workflow, adapting various styles, genres, mediums as projects have required. And through the years, you've grown with the industry demand and continuously improved efficiency by revitalizing your skill set to stay aligned with advancing technologies. And as a principal character artist at Respawn, Damon is tasked with shaping some of the most iconic characters that headline their titles. And some of the other titles that, some of the credits that you have, I'm aware of, are The Walking Dead Onslaught in VR as character art director, Westworld Awakening VR as character art director, and then you were also senior character artist for a couple of great shows on television, Supergirl, as well as the Flash TV series. So very cool to have you with us today. Welcome. Thanks for being here.
Good to be here.
All right. Yeah, so I think what I like to kick it off with for all of our guests, if you could just tell us a little bit about your own journey as an artist. I know that a lot of folks that watch this stream are younger artists that are aspiring to work in the industry, but a lot of times we don't get to hear other people's stories, and I think those really help to shape perspective. So what can you tell us about yourself?
Absolutely. I definitely took the long road here. I always enjoyed making art. Most of the people watching this stream can probably relate to that. And I was always, loved video games, loved animation, movies, especially growing up. And I always, in the back of my mind, I always, would think, man, it would be cool to work on those kind of things. But I didn't really know what that meant. I didn't know what a character artist was or a production artist or anything like that. I just knew I liked to draw. Later on, I discovered I really liked to sculpt. In high school, I actually took a sculpting class. It was actually a pottery class, but I was always like, not the best student. So like when they were telling us to make pots, I was over in the corner like sculpting people and stuff like that. I would make like a little dragon and stuff like that. And luckily, I had a really cool teacher. It was like his last. He was like an old guy. He was like a semester before retirement, so he just he was like whatever. And so he saw me in the corner, like sculpting characters and stuff. And he was actually really supportive of it. He was like, man, that's really cool. Why don't you just go ahead and I'll grade you off of these instead of a pot, And so, he kind of just like said like, okay, if you can just make, 3 characters in the class, then, I'll pass you. And so that's what I did. I make like a dragon. I made like another dude, and I just kind of like had fun with that. And that was kind of my first dive into that. After high school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do still. I would draw like comics and stuff like that. I had to get a real job. So, working retail, all that stuff, customer service. Some of you guys can relate to that too. And I hated it. It was terrible. I always knew that wasn't something I wanted to do for the rest of my life. Came up from a blue collar family. My dad worked multiple jobs, driving a truck and stuff like that. And he was always like, yeah, after high school, you can just drive this truck with me. And I was like, it's also not something I want to do. I like to do my art. So, I started going just to like taking community college classes. I took a few more art and sculpting classes in community college, just to kind of like find stuff that I was interested in. I always tell my students it's important to be open-minded. I feel like students that go into that go into a curriculum that think they really know what they want to do, it could be a little bit of a hindrance. It's always better to have a mindset of I'm just going to try to absorb everything and, just work hard at it and figure out what I'm good at. So that was kind of my mindset. I took a bunch of those community college classes. I kind of learned that I liked creating things with my hands a little bit more, drawing, sculpting, things like that. But I still didn't know anything about 3D at all. Yeah. I ended up enrolling in the Art Institute just on a whim, basically. I knew that, they had like a good sales pitch there. They had graduated some people that worked in the industry. It worked for me, so I joined up. And at the time, I was an animation major. At the time, I think at that point, I really enjoyed, like DreamWorks and Pixar had really taken off, and taken the world by storm. Shrek and Toy Story and all that. And so I was like, man, I want to be a part of that. But I still didn't know exactly what that meant, So I just took the curriculum. I took a 3D modeling class, and it was 3ds Max. And that was kind of the beginning. I really enjoyed that. I just enjoyed, I don't know, something about it. It was close to that bug that I caught when I first picked up sculpting, but kind of in a different way. And so I had a really good instructor for that too. But I still didn't really know what that meant. I knew how to box model a few things. I was also taking drawing classes. At the time, I was kind of on the fence. I wanted to be a concept artist. I was drawing a lot. I was hanging out with all the concept artists, students at the school, kind of like just learning from them. And so I kind of started focusing on that. And as time went by, I kind of learned that I enjoyed drawing, but I enjoyed making working in a third dimension a little bit more. So when I first took a ZBrush class, that's when it really connected. And that was actually later on. That was like towards the end of my time at the Art Institute. At that point, I knew, I thought that I was going to be a concept artist. And then when I picked up ZBrush, it changed everything. Like I got into like the sculpting tools, and like I still didn't know what everything meant. I didn't know anything really about topology. I didn't know anything about texturing or any of that. I just knew that I really liked the sculpting side of things, and I just kind of dove headfirst into that. And I kind of made a last second decision in my last 6 months of going to school that I was gonna be a character artist. And I started really and actually it's funny because the Gnomon DVDs here back in the day, those were a big catalyst. Our library had like all the DVDs. I could never buy them myself because they were so expensive. So I would just check them out, and watch them absorb everything. And so I picked up some sculpting classes from that, early ZBrush classes, like Eat 3D, all those guys back in the day. And I just I dove into it, and I was up late just sculpting characters, creatures. That was like kind of my first thing, is like the creature sculpting, because you can focus more on like just the tools and learning, and not so much on anatomy and things like that, which I had a novice understanding of like basic anatomy, but working on creatures kind of like lets you just kind of dive into it without worrying about that stuff. So like I'll get into creature sculpting a lot. When I graduated, my reel was actually a mix, because it was like a cross-pollination of characters, concept art, environment modeling, all the different phases that I went through when I was in school. So I graduated as a generalist. I had at the time I had I'd only been making characters for like 6 months, so I was all right, but I wasn't a powerhouse or anything like that. So when I graduated, I was lucky enough to land a job just as a generalist at a studio in Hollywood, basically working on just odds and ends. It was like a 6-month contract. I did everything from rigging to basic modeling, vehicle modeling, texturing, lighting, any like odd 3D job that they had that they wanted someone to do. Because at the time it was in the industry at that time, it was kind of a transition. They were still using like some of the older tools. They were using like Lightwave, things like that. And they needed someone to come in who understood like the newer tools like Maya and Max. And so I was like the 3ds Max guy that came in and kind of this new odds and end job. So I did that for a little while. When my contract was up, then I kind of just bounced around a little bit. I did some freelance. And then I landed eventually at a studio called Brain Zoo Studios up in the Valley. And they've been around forever, like just kind of doing odds and ends jobs too. They basically do a lot of like game trailers and stuff like that in advertising. So I was there as a journalist too. I actually just came in pretty much doing the same thing I was doing at the previous job. No characters really. I had never done any characters professionally yet. It was kind of something that I would do kind of on the side. And that that was still my goal. Even when I was working as a generalist, I understood. I was humble enough to understand that like I'm just not good enough yet for someone to hire me as a character artist. I need to get better at this. So that was what I did on my free time. I would at work I would do whatever they needed me to do. And when I got home, I would do what I wanted to do, which was sculpt characters. And so I would just do that every night, every day. I would make sure that I was kind of upgrading myself in different ways. I would practice my anatomy, or I would check out the latest ways to make hair or whatever. Just kind of giving myself little projects. And so when I was at Brain Zoo, I was there for a few years. After like the first year, I had finally gotten enough experience making characters where I was starting to get a little bit of attention. I got some pieces featured in 3D World magazine, just like a little side page kind of thing. And one of the producers took note. They're like, "Oh, we saw that you like doing characters. This looks pretty cool." And then started kind of like slowly throwing me in characters. At the first, they would start test me off, give me like a really small like side character to do. And we'll just throw everything into that, and then like they'll start giving me more and more like senior characters to work on. And by like the third year I was there, that was pretty much the character guy. I wasn't like an official character artist. I was just my title was still 3D artist, but I was like the person doing all the character work. And so based on that, like I was starting to finally get some mileage in at work as well as at home. So eventually I got the call from Kojima Productions, and that was like kind of my big break. Someone there had spotted some of the pieces I made, and they threw me an art test. The art test there was just to redesign one of their original Metal Gear Solid characters. So I did a redesign of Revolver Ocelot.
Awesome.
And, they were really, they dug it. And luckily I was the last character artist ever hired there, actually, it turns out.
Wow.
I was like one of the last artists hired there because I was there for exactly a year before everything shut down. But in that year, that was an amazing experience. I got to make connections with some amazingly talented artists that I'm still connected with now. I'm good friends. And so, I just made the most of my time there. And I tell my students this too. When I was at Kojima, I was the last artist hired there. I was the most junior artist as well, because I had nothing under my belt. So they weren't going to give me Solid Snake to model. They weren't going to give me, any of the hero characters. They gave me, whatever was left on the plate that pretty much wasn't taken by the other more senior artists. And, sometimes artists will take that, personal, or they'll start, moping around about, oh, I don't get to work on the cool stuff. And I was never like that. I just took it as, dude, I'm working on Metal Gear. This is awesome. I was that series since I was a little kid. I had the original Nintendo Metal Gear, back in the day. I didn't even know what it was, and so I was like, that was just a huge thing for me. So I was like, I will work on whatever you need. I was doing side little, like pretty much, if you guys play Metal Gear Solid 5, the online, all the crazy hats that you wear, like the squid and the fish and all those weird hats, those are all, my models. So that's basically what I worked on there. That's what was left. And I kind of just jumped into it. I modeled them, and I also I rigged them all up, so all the physics on there was mine. And then at some point there was like, oh, this guy, he likes doing the rigging part of it too. So they started throwing me rigging stuff, and luckily that background of working as a generalist kind of came into play, because I'd already had some rigging experience. So like very simple, like leaf joint rigs and things like that. So like being well-rounded has always kind of helped me in my career. Yeah, that's why it kind of goes back to what I was talking about before, when I tell my students to be open-minded and like malleable when you're taking your classes. Never take it for granted. Even if you know that you're going to be a character artist and you're taking this rigging class or this coding class, it's like, oh, this isn't what I'm going to do for a living. I'm just going to coast through this and try to get a C. I was never like that. I was always like, I want to be as well-rounded as I can, and it helped me throughout my career. So at Kojima, they took advantage of that. I was even doing some illustration. A lot of stuff they got cut, but I was doing at some point they're going to have like these cartoon stickers you could collect, and so I was drawing all these different stickers. The cute little puppy decoy, I made that little guy. That was like one of the first things I made, with all the fur cards and stuff like that. So at least odds and ends. So no job was too small for me. I took every little task like it was the most important thing in the world, and I went full tilt on it. And that's actually benefited me too later on, because one of the producers, the producer that I worked under at Kojima, she was a person that I reported to. And when Kojima shut down everything, she ended up at Respawn Entertainment. And she's actually the person that brought me on. And that's where I'm at now. So I got this job based on, just an impression that I left, years earlier. Just on hand. I didn't know that this was going to, lead to something down the line. But, it just, I always use that too as a motivation for my students to work on having a good attitude at all times. Even when you're in your class, even like I said, even if you're in that rigging class that, that you think is BS, that you're not going to use, everyone around you, all the students around you, those are potential, connections later on.
Absolutely.
Coworkers, and they take note. You take note whether mentally or not, or subconsciously or not. Who the knucklehead is in the class and who the grinder is in the class. And if someone's asking for a referral, it's like, hey, we need a character artist, or we need a concept artist. You know anyone? Then you're going to think about that person that you knew back in Gnomon. You're going to hit them up and see what they're up to. Hit them up.
Totally.
That happens all the time, and it's such a small industry, and so that's something that I always kind of try to drive home with my students, is that just your work ethic and the vibe that you put out there is just as important as the work that you put in your portfolio, and a lot of times even more so. I'm sure we've all met some prima donnas that are super talented and they're getting top row all the time, but they're impossible to work with, Mm-hmm. And so I always try to hammer that home. So off of that tangent, so back to the rest of my so after Kojima, I went to Obsidian Entertainment in Irvine, and I got to work on some cool stuff like Pillars of Eternity, Tyranny. That was really awesome. So I was there for about a year. I also did they also would do all the skinning on their characters there too. So that also came to play there too. So that was great. And after that, I started branching out into TV and film a little bit more. So that's when I got the call from one of my buddies from the Art Institute, and he was working on at a studio for Deluxe Entertainment. If you guys are familiar with Deluxe, like you might not have ever heard of them, but if you look at the credits, pretty much the movie credits on 90% of movies they've worked on, you'll see the little Deluxe logo down there. So they're huge. And so they have satellite studios, and one of them was called Encore Entertainment. So that's the studio that did all the CG for Supergirl and Flash. So I had a buddy working there, and he told me about the project, and I was down. So I joined up with him, and they had an awesome crew over there. They had basically like a ton of former artists from Blur Entertainment that that they kind of poached from over there to work on their stuff. So that was great, because I had always been a fan of Blur. I had always that was another thing that I just as far as their work and their reels, they were always kind of set the bar for like how good CG could be. And having an opportunity to work with those people was great. And once again, I just went in there like a student, and I just absorbed everything about how they conducted themselves and how they worked and like how they grinded. And so I kind of incorporated a lot of that into myself as an artist too, to kind of grow as an artist. So working on Supergirl and Flash was great. It's very chaotic. Working in television is, I call it like the Wild West, because it's just constantly on the move. It's you're working on a character on a Monday that's probably going to be on air that Friday sometimes. In between, it's crazy because deadlines are rock solid. You can't tell someone that, I need an extra day on this. It's like, no, the animators need this tomorrow, because then they got to render the day after that, and it's got to be on TV. So like you got to be on top of it. So that was a big one. Just learning how to work in that kind of chaotic, crazy environment. And also they gave you a lot of ownership on your characters too. I did some creature designs there, where basically they didn't have time to hire a concept artist to fully flesh out things like that. So a lot of times it'd just be a napkin drawing. The director would give me basically a cocktail napkin drawing that he would sketch out really quick, and he'd be like, do something with this. You got 2 days, and then I would sculpt it out. I would do my so that kind of led back to the concept art phase that I was in school. Like kind of concept out different iterations in 3D. ZBrush is great for that. Just quickly iterating, just dynameshing stuff together, and I would show them to them, and they would sign off or give me feedback, and then I just kind of go from there. And it was like I said, it was breakneck speed, but you learn how to deal with the pressure and the stress that way. It was like a baptism by fire. It was crazy.
And you learn really fast too.
Yeah, you got to. You got to think on your feet. You got to be able to collaborate quickly. It's crazy, man. So that was awesome. I did that for about a year. The thing with TV though is that in between seasons, you're just on hiatus basically. Like when Flash season 2 is over, you're not sitting there working on Flash season 3 yet. They haven't even written the script for it yet, so they don't know what's going to be in there. So you're sitting at home waiting by the phone. So that and it can be for months sometimes. So you got to learn how to save your money and stuff too, because you're not getting paid everyone's contract. So during one of those hiatuses, I got another connection from Brain Zoo. The studio he was working at the time was a upstart VR studio called Servios. And they needed a character artist. At that time, they were working on the early vertical slice for a game called Raw Data. And that was their first IP that they're going to put out. They're like, hey, they're asking around, does anyone know any character artists? And the guy hit me up. And so for a while, I was just doing freelance, from home, just freelancing characters remotely. And I ended up making all the hero characters for their game. They were happy enough with my work that they actually brought me in. They wanted to bring me in full time. So that's cool. So that's how I made the jump from Encore to Servios. And at that time, they didn't have a character art department at all. I was the character artist. So for like that first year there, it was just me running the show. That was pretty crazy too. But because I already kind of used to that kind of stress from working at TV, it was fine. Like it was just it was actually kind of easier. Because they gave me a lot of freedom to kind of set, the pipeline and kind of, run the show myself. So after a year, Raw Data did pretty well. And they got some good, they got another series of funding. And we had enough funds for me to start building a team there to, help me out. So I wasn't, killing myself. So I started building an art team there. I developed the art test, do majority of the recruiting. Me and the recruiter would just work together to, find people on ArtStation and stuff like that and bring them in. And so, we started building it to when we got to a team of 7 artists. Their rigging team was also under that art team. And so I got the move from senior character artist to director of character art, because, that was pretty much the whole team I built from scratch. So said, okay, this is your team now run it. So that's what I did for 4 years. And we put out some amazing titles. They also work at a pretty breakneck speed. They were at one point we were working on 4 games at once for multiple SKUs. So it's 4 games on like 4 different platforms: PSVR, Oculus, was it Quest and the Vive. So we were it was pretty crazy. So put out some amazing titles. One of those was Walking Dead Onslaught. Kree's Rise to Glory, the Westworld game was great. We got to work closely with HBO. They were in there like twice a week, with feedback. So that was awesome, kind of working a little bit ancillary back with the TV industry again.
Yeah.
And so after 4 years, that's when like I said, that old connection from Kojima hit me up to come to Respawn, and that's where I've been for the last year.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and thank you for sharing your story. There's also, you're dropping a ton of knowledge too. Like, this isn't just your career. There's a lot of information, I think, for people about building a career. And the first thing, that I noticed and what you're talking about is, part of my role at Gnomon as a representative is I get to spend a lot of time with high school students, with college students, talking about the industry. And, I think the stuff that gets marketed as the art of the entertainment industry often is mostly concept art. Or in a lot of cases, the art of books, a lot of concept art, that kind of thing. So I think a lot of younger artists look in the industry and they go, well, that's the thing I need to do. And it's also the thing that's closest to what I know how to do right now, which is drawing. And that's great. I mean, I'm also a concept artist and it's amazing. But I think a big part of what I'm hearing in your story is you also were willing to not just have blinders on and go, I'm only about this, but you started learning other things. And through learning a lot of different things, it actually expanded your focus and open up more possibilities of what you could be doing professionally, and you found your way from there. So the reason why I bring it up is I talk to a lot of artists that are, a lot of people love to make characters, right? Characters are super interesting, super fun. We can really pour ourselves into them. And so, character concept art is one thing. And then character artists for games and things like that is a related thing, but something else in terms of, what you're doing is you're actually making the real 3D character that's going to be appearing on screen, usually based on the concept art. Can you talk to us just a little bit before we share your screen, before we get into talking about some of the stuff you're doing at Gnomon? Can you talk to us about what that discovery was like for you, maybe for other artists out there that are like, I really like doing characters, but I'm open to more than just character design. Like, I'm open to working on characters in other parts of the pipeline.
Yeah. So, I mean, I always say that if you have an aptitude for art, then you should take advantage of that and never pigeonhole yourself into one discipline. You hear this term all the time of a jack of all trades, master of none. There is some truth to that if you're broadening your horizons too much, but I feel like anything that fits into the art side of things, that's all one trade for me.
Yeah.
When it comes to characters, and especially because when you're working professionally, you're in a pipeline. You're a part of a larger, machine, and you need to have at least a basic understanding of everyone around you's job. If I don't understand about rigging, then how am I going to make a model that's it's optimized to be rigged properly? If I don't know about animation, how am I going to know where to put edge loops? If I don't know about like just it goes on and on. Like all the disciplines kind of work together. So it's really important to have a good foundation, and obviously focus on your strengths. I always tell my students it's like a balancing act. You want to try to identify what your strengths are. And your weaknesses, but also try to attack those weaknesses at the same time. When I give my students, because I give my students a lot of freedom to choose what character they're working on and how they approach it in my class. The way my class is set up, you have the option of making. You can get an A just making a bust, just a head and some shoulders. And if you execute that bust well enough, then that can be, a great portfolio piece. But I also let you do a full character, and you can add as much stuff on there as you want. You can choose whatever type of character. It could be sci-fi or medieval. You can have a ton of armor on it, or maybe just wearing a t-shirt and jeans. The important thing is that you are, exploring the kind of the corners of the discipline, especially as an early student. You want to try to expand as much as possible. So like I always let them kind of choose a concept that you think is going to play to your strengths. If you find that you enjoy modeling hard surface a lot more, then maybe you want to choose like some of mech on like a lot of mech stuff. But at the same time, if you're like not that experienced with like sculpting heads, then maybe don't put a helmet on that guy. Maybe, give yourself some, some room to work on that weakness, but it's just head, so like you can still focus on your strengths by working on those weaker parts.
Yeah.
So it's always a kind of a balancing act of understanding, how to push yourself, but also, play to your strengths.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I, the thing I'm hearing you say time and time again, even just from your story, is a lot of people get hung up on asking the question, am I talented enough? Right. And so then their weaknesses become really scary things. Whereas if you don't rely on just the idea of whatever talent is, and you're willing to just be super motivated and super passionate about leaning into learning things, that's ultimately what carries you.
Right.
Yeah, 100%. Well, should we get your screen share up? And I know you got some stuff you want to show us today.
Let me open one more thing up too.
Sure thing.
Open
my colleague who's producing the stream today, he can get your screen share up there.
Yeah, maybe you can ask me another question while I'm pulling this up.
Oh, sure thing. Yeah, in fact, maybe a good thing to ask is for those who are interested, what are you in your class at Gnomon, which is essentially going to be 3D characters for games. I think that's the primary focus. Are you spending the majority of class time working specifically within ZBrush, or are you branching out into other software for the pipeline that you're teaching?
Oh, that's a good question. So basically, only the first 3 weeks are spent in ZBrush, and after that, we jump out of ZBrush and we get into the scary territory, or but it's scary to students, and that's getting into optimization, texturing, lighting, all that good stuff. So it's always important for me to kind of get them out of the comfort zone as soon as possible. Learning, because most students that take my class, they've taken the digital sculpting class, or they've worked enough in ZBrush. I've got a lot of students that come in that are very talented when it comes to making something look really great in ZBrush, and really getting something that's that looks like a top row quality almost, as far as like the high poly. But what they're usually taking my class for, because they see character art for games, is they're taking my class to learn, okay, how do I take this cool model and start, getting it to, be something that I can actually optimize and put in a game. All right, we can show the screen now if you guys.
All right, cool. Yeah, we've got it up.
Yeah, so this is a character that I made. So I before I taught at Gnomon, I had another online class at CG Master Academy, and this is this is the character that I walked the class through. And I still have a bunch of videos that I use from this that I use to instruct how to make. And the reason I use this is because it has a little bit of everything on here. And I'm constantly pulling from old pieces. I got my whole hard drive hooked up with all of my old work. And whenever a student has a question, there's always something on one of these models that I can pull up to illustrate better what I'm talking about. I've also been known to just pull up my ArtStation and show like final renders. I'm a big proponent of more show than tell. So I can describe all day how to put a proper edge loop on something to get the right bevel or something like that. But it's a lot better to show that kind of stuff. So like, for instance, after that first 3 weeks of ZBrush, I would get into Marvelous Designer, and I start getting into how to get good cloth. And then after that, we're jumping in, and I'm showing you guys how to do things like getting like fiber mesh, for instance, to get like body hair, how to cover hair in general. I always use the latest techniques when it comes to showing off how to execute things. So in my class is always changing because of that. So no two terms are always the same, because I think this is not even the highest, because I'm constantly changing with the times. So for instance, the way in week 7, I go over texturing heads. And like 2 years ago, I was teaching it completely different than now. Now I'm using Texture XYZ to do texturing. But back in the day when I was doing this is all textured by hand. And I was just showing different ways of doing it in ZBrush. And so it's constantly changing. And even with the new update that ZBrush just put out, that's going to change the way I model this. You know, because there's some really cool beveling tools that I was just checking out. We were actually checking it out at work today, right before I jumped on this call. So there's always going to be that kind of, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Evolution of the class.
Yeah.
So like the way I handle cloth, you know, like I used to do a lot more hand sculpting back in the day. I still teach those techniques, but you know, it's changes. And also at the same time, I use examples of stylized characters as well, because you know, in this industry, you know, like I said, you know, when I was at Obsidian, I had to do a lot more stylized stuff. When I was at Servios, we like I said, we're working on 4 games at once. 2 of those games might be hyper realistic, and 2 of them might be super stylized. And so I had to constantly, you know, put on different hats. That also kind of affected the way, you know, when I hired my team. Half the people I hired, it was their strengths were realistic, and half of them were really stylized stuff like this. I always made sure they could do both in a pinch, but I would always try to delegate work to them that you know, lean more one way or the other more, so they could handle stuff like this. So the approaches to these types of characters are obviously really different. And so the way that I model my class, once again, I give you a lot of leeway on how you can, you know, choose to, you know, how to run the class for yourself. You can choose the stylized path, or you can choose the realistic path. And my syllabus is actually kind of broken up into 2 parts. My syllabus, it has, so for instance, your homework for week 3, if you're doing a realistic character, your homework for week 3 is to have all the fine details and everything sculpted, like the wrinkles, you know, the small little details and likenesses and stuff like that. If you're doing a stylized character, then your homework for week 3 is to establish a shape language for your character, like your straights and curves, how much of your character is like soft polished, how much is hard polished. You know, having the hair blocked out in a completely different way. I show different techniques on how you can get like stylized hair, using like some, you know, creating some custom brushes. So, and I break my class up into like those 2 sections. Yeah. So that's also kind of like that's also been kind of a benefit of not putting yourself in a you know, shoehorning yourself. Like I said, I've gotten like a lot of I guess I've had people try to steer me one way or another early on in my career. Like I had mentors myself, you know, when I first graduated from school, and you know, people who were working in the industry or former instructors. A lot of them would tell me, like, you need to choose a path and stick to it. You need to choose, you know, if you like, if you're going to be a realistic sci-fi character artist who only does realistic sci-fi male characters, you know, or you do stylized cutesy female characters in a medieval setting, you know, they're trying to like tell you to specialize like that. And I've never really been like that. If you look at my portfolio, it's all over the place. Even my early work, it's all over the place. One character I'm doing stylized, the next one I'm doing super realistic, then I'm doing medieval, then I'm doing you know, sci-fi. So I was always like, I guess it was kind of like just being ADD, where I couldn't settle on one thing. It all interested me. Like I go on ArtStation, and you know, I just, you know, it's like a buffet. You see all these amazing pieces, and they all amaze me in different ways. You know, I was like, oh, look at this guy, like he's so good at rendering skin, or look how she does her colors on these stylized characters. That's super inspiring. And so like I would, you know, on any given day, I'll be inspired by something different, and I create a piece that kind of fed off of that inspiration, and it led to a very you know, diverse portfolio, which helped me a lot, especially when I was at Servios. Like I said, we're working on so many different styles. There's so many artists that don't want to branch out like that, and that's great. I'm not saying specialization is bad, because obviously there's some amazing artists that really specialize in certain things, but that doesn't work for everyone. A lot of people like they'll get stagnated. If I'm modeling, you know, post-apocalyptic people with cargo pants every single day for like, you know, years and years and years, I'll go crazy. I got to throw a sci-fi character in there. I got to throw a cartoony character in there just to kind of cleanse the palette. So
yeah, I feel like that's a little bit the concept artist in you too, though, right? Like a concept, you move quickly, and you want to have a variety of designs and approaches and stuff.
Yeah.
So I've got a question about your class. Could someone, in terms, like, say somebody's out there and they're like, hey, you know, I'm interested in jumping into your class as an individual class at Gnomon. I already know how to sculpt in ZBrush. I feel very proficient in ZBrush, but I know nothing about what comes after that with what you're teaching. Could a person confidently jump into your class and expect to beginner in those areas like optimization and that kind of stuff and learn those things in your class?
That is actually what my class is for.
Okay, perfect. Yeah,
that's mostly the reason that that my class exists is to cater to those kind of students, and that's usually the most successful students in my class. Those are the ones. Usually, it's the ones who are concept artists or just really proficient with ZBrush, but lack the they don't know what comes after that. Like that question just came. Like that's the perfect storm usually in my class, because
cool.
You have a good art foundation, and if you can make a good sculpt like this right here, this never went past the high res part. But if I were to make this low res, my job is pretty much done for me. Like it's pretty much downhill from here as far as difficulty, because I've already solved the major I guess hurdles with this kind of character. Like I've already got the forms and everything. Obviously I'm gonna have to do something different to optimize the hair, but I have a good look dev of what's going on here.
Yeah.
And so like the same thing with all these characters. Like if you can have a good high res sculpt, that just sets a table for everything. We're at Respawn, for instance, and a lot of studios, the sign off on a character is usually just on the high res. We usually, when we're presenting, to whoever makes the decision to sign off on a character, it's usually just the high res sculpt, even like the non textured, because they've already approved the concept, so they've approved the colors. On the 3D model side of approval, it's really just they want to see all the forms, so it'll literally be it'll look something like this, and it might have some gray tones in there, kind of show like the contrast and everything. But this is as far as it'll get, and it won't even be posed. It'll just be in like a bind pose. Yeah. But they can see anyone who's competent, anyone on that approval side of things, who understands the pipeline and really knows what they're doing. This is all they need. And then from here, like I said, it's just retoppling, making sure that you're getting good bakes, that all of these nice details are transferring to the final piece. And that's where the final 8 weeks comes into play in my class, is starting off good topo, then getting really good UVs that's going to support a really nice bake, that's going to support really nice texturing, that's going to work well with a material setup, that's going to light well in a scene, and it just goes down the kind of the pipe like that.
Yeah, well, that's great news, because I think also obviously our full-time program in Gnomon is going to teach the entire pipeline, which is incredibly valuable. But I think if you're an artist who is out there that's already working and wants to learn more of these skill sets of preparing an asset or a model for games, or if you love to draw and you're using ZBrush, but you're like, man, I'd love to develop some more skills that could open up more employable options for me. I mean, something like Damon's class could really get you pointed in the right direction. We've got a few questions that have come in along the way. If I don't want to cut off anything else you wanted to show.
I usually just pull them up as the questions come.
Okay, cool. Awesome. So the first of our questions that's come in is, what do you think about Character Creator or similar software to get the base for your character?
Character Creator and MetaHuman and all that. I mean, that's the future. Like it or not. I was actually joking with my team, like when MetaHuman first dropped, we got to look at it at the early release, and I was like, well, I guess we should start looking at new careers, just joking, but that's never going to be the case. The character creators, like anything else, is a tool, right? And even the best tool out there is only going to take care of like that first maybe 80%. The last 20%, that's where the artist comes in and makes it really come to life, and that's always going to be the case. Even with MetaHuman, even with using a texture XYZ for skin, the details and things like that. I know a lot of people who, before XYZ, they were just laying all those those details by hand, and they were super, super good at it.
Yeah.
Obviously, like in a production setting, that's no longer the case. Like you can still do that for your personal work. All of my personal work, I still definitely, like this is a personal piece. I do my stuff by hand still.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not going to hold up to an 8K render, but that's not really my goal.
Right.
I'm not doing any cinematics. This isn't going to be, in a game or anything. It's just for me to kind of have fun and explore. Yeah. And so like on that side of things, it's always going to be the artist. And even on the production side, basically those tools are just going to make it so you can make more characters. That's how I look at it.
Yep.
MetaHuman makes it so like, okay, now I don't have to spend, 6 weeks getting the shapes, just perfect with the move brush. I can just, kind of adjust the sliders a little bit, get it approved, and then get on to the rest of it. And a lot of times, especially if you're working on games that are anything outside of like a contemporary game, if you're not working on The Last of Us or Uncharted or something where everyone's just, wearing clothes that exist in real life, or a military game, then you're still going to have to make all those clothing from scratch. You're still going to have to make, a sci-fi game. There's no sci-fi armor that you're probably going to be able to just throw in a scanner.
Right.
So they're making the clothing and everything is still really important. A lot of students that take my class, that's also a lot of students I get who are really good at head sculpting, but haven't worked on enough of like the textile side of things, and that they don't have a lot of experience making armor or working in Marvelous Designer. I've got hours and hours of pre-recorded video of tutorials that I've made from Marvelous Designer, and I also do in-class instruction. So you can, ask me questions.
Yeah.
What I do is supplement my class with that. I share the videos, and then when that class comes for me to demo, then you can ask me specific stuff that that pertains to your character.
Yeah. I'm so glad you brought up that idea of, every new thing is, it's a new thing, but it's a tool. I couldn't agree with you more. And I think you're making a really good point is, use it as a tool, right? Not a crutch. I think some of that's that scare that can happen of like, we're all going to be out of a job now. Sometimes is a little akin to the idea of like, well, I don't need to know anatomy, or I don't need to know how to sculpt a human and that kind of stuff. I can just use this. And I think when you change it from being a tool into being a crutch, you're really limiting yourself, because if you know anatomy, well, then you can start with a character base, but then you know what you're going to do with that base. As opposed to, well, I guess it just has to look like this. And I couldn't agree more. I think that's so good because you get scares kind of from both ends of the curve when a new tool like that drops. Some people are like, well, all these jobs are going to be gone. And other people are like, oh, well, I don't have to work hard anymore to be an artist. Yeah.
You just have to make more. Like they're now with all these tools, like back in the day, for instance, texturing is one of those things. I remember when Substance Painter first came on. I remember I was at Kojima Productions. And the guys that actually founded Substance Painter, they came to our studio to kind of show off this new tool that was going to change the industry, Substance Painter, and ended up doing that. Prior to that, everything was textured by hand. It was a combination of like poly paint and Photoshop trickery and all that stuff. And before that, they would usually give you like a week or 2 weeks to texture a character. Now you could texture a character in like 3 days. And so what that means is now I can make 3 times as many characters. And that's 3 times as many characters in my portfolio. It's 3 times as many cool characters I get to work on. So I see it as a plus.
Totally. Absolutely. Well, another question we've got that came in is, do you think, this is an interesting question. Do you think small can have a more friendly work environment than big companies? I don't know that that's necessarily a general rule, but maybe you could talk to us a little bit about the differences between working in a smaller or larger studio.
No, it depends on the studio. I've been at small studios that have great cultures. I've been at small studios that have kind of toxic cultures, and the same thing for larger studios. I've been at larger studios that were kind of like a sweatshop, and I've been at larger studios like Respawn and like Kojima was, that were awesome, and everyone's just super friendly, and there's no tension or anything like that to deal with. So it really depends on just who's running the company, and that usually is the biggest teller, is who's running the company, because that kind of propagates down to the culture and kind of affects how everyone experiences there. So I'd say just ask people who work. That's the best thing. Like even like Glassdoor and stuff like that. Glassdoor is kind of like Yelp now, where like like they're only showing you the best reviews. Like they're hiding the other ones. And so it's good just to kind of reach out to your network and ask. Like, hey, are you happy there? And they'll usually be honest with you, especially if it's just you and them, like having a beer or something like that. They'll tell you. They'll be like, oh, the pay's good, but like as soon as I clock out, I'm out of there because I can't stand the place.
Well, so there's that golden rule too. You mentioned how small the industry can be. There's that golden rule of just like be nice, be a nice person, because you never know who you're going to be working for or with.
Exactly.
Another question that's come in. I think this is a great question just about creative sustainability as an artist. How do you deal with the sometimes stressful work of being a 3D artist, and what are some of your time management strategies?
Yeah, so that's a good one. I would say it comes down to like, and I get asked this a lot. The question I get that's related to that is what drives you or what motivates you as an artist. And like I look at it like what drives you and what gets you through those lulls and things like that is it's basically your motivation. And your motivation, I always compare it to like a fuel source. And there's renewable fuel sources and there's non-renewable fuel sources. Like for instance, like fossil fuel. It's very useful and it's very prevalent, but it's going to run out someday. And I always compare that to like getting in the industry or doing what you do. Maybe you think about the time that art teacher told you that you were no good, or someone that told you weren't going to make it, or whatever like that, and you kind of relate back to that. That can be a good motivator, but at some point, you need something that's more renewable. And so there's a lot of different ways you can go about that. Like I always compare it to like I'm going to make a sports analogy here, but it's not going to be a obscure one. Like Michael Jordan, right? Michael Jordan, like as great as he is, you can, if you know about him, he, his motivator at the beginning was he got cut from his high school basketball team, and that's what kind of motivated him. And later on, what motivated him was competition. He wanted to be the best, and that drove him a lot throughout his career, and that to the point where it almost burnt bridges because he would kind of take it too far sometimes. And so I always say like it's good to mix and match your fuel sources, your motivations.
Yeah.
Competition is great as an artist, but it's more like competition is like nuclear energy. It's like it's super, super powerful, but if it's not harnessed properly, it can blow everything up.
Totally.
And so I compare that to like, go on ArtStation and look at awesome artists that you aspire to be. But at the same time, don't get to the point where you're jealous or resentful or get discouraged. That's when you can turn into Chernobyl and kind of you can
absolutely.
Yeah. You want to use it as, oh man, look what they're doing now. That's so cool. Like I want to maybe they got a class they're teaching, or maybe you've got a buddy who's a little bit more advanced than you and is doing great things. Instead of getting like jealous or resentful, hit them up. Maybe grab a beer and ask them like, hey man, how'd you get good at this? Or like, what's your secret? And do it that way. There's also the fuel source that's really renewable that I've kind of used to drive me is just getting better, trying to constantly get better at what you're doing. That's like solar energy because you're constantly reaching for this thing. That's there's always somewhere to go, somewhere to grow, to get closer to it.
Yeah.
And, so I use that as a motivator of just trying to get better and better at what I do and finding different ways to get to that. Teaching helps me get better at what I do because you have to really know your stuff to be able to teach it to others. You have to know it well enough to teach it in a way that, if someone doesn't know what baking a normal map means, you can still explain it to them in simple terms,
Yes.
That's hard to do. It sounds easy enough, but it's hard to explain something very technical in a very attainable, casual way. So like I'm always finding different ways to get better at teaching, at running my class. So I can cram more stuff into there. Like right now, the way my class is constructed, I have enough time to teach everything in there except for hair for the most part. Like hair just takes so much time that I will constantly try to steer my students to something like this where it's more manageable, something that's maybe tied back, that's dreadlocks and things like that, because hair is almost its own class in of itself.
Yeah.
It's so time consuming. So I always try to tell them to choose concepts that don't have crazy hair. And so like I try to get better and better every term of trying to fit more of hair instruction. And I used to not cover hair until week 7. Now I'm starting to teach it little by little, starting, at the beginning. And
wow,
then
yeah.
give you tidbits. So what I do now is I give you little tidbits from week to week that give you a little bit more of the piece of the puzzle. And then and it gets more and more advanced as it goes. And I kind of walk you into it. So like that, just, so that's how I approach everything. I try to approach everything like I'm just trying to get better. And so like when I run into those issues where like things are stressful or things, are seem unmanageable, I just kind of go back to the drawing board and I simplify it the same way. And I just take it one task at a time. And I think about like, this is going to make me a better artist in the long run. Like when I talk about, working in television, that was the most stressful time in my life. That was super stressful. We had people like, we had someone who had a stroke. They were so overworked.
Oh my goodness.
It's crazy. Like it's, but because they kind of did it to themselves. They wanted to grind it out and be there. And they didn't want to take any breaks, and they kind of caught up to them. But it was very stressful. But at the same time, I just, I took that experience as I'm going to learn how to time manage better, because I don't want to, burn myself out. And I'm going to learn how to deal with stress better. I'm going to learn how to deal with when I have 3 producers that all have different feedback for me. How do I manage that? And that leads into another thing that I teach in my class that I wish was taught more when I was in school, is working on soft skills.
Yes.
Well, school in general, they're going to teach you all the hard skills, especially Gnomon. Gnomon's the best school in the world at teaching you those hard skills. And they do a great job of hiring people who are in the industry. So they can impart a lot of that knowledge as well. Mm-hmm. And I always try to focus on teaching you those soft skills, basically how to manage, how to time manage, how to deal where you're getting conflicting feedback, or I try to present different scenarios. What do you do when like I sculpted this guy out and I spent all this time on the vest, and they're like, hey, market research showed that more people will buy our games if this if this is actually a long sleeve jacket.
Right.
It's like, well, what do I do with these robot arms I made? And so,
right.
Do you freak out? Do you, put your head down on your desk, or do you understand how to communicate and present your side of things to the art director or producer and be like, hey, I understand that, but maybe we can compromise some way. Maybe one of the sleeves is ripped off so we can show the arm, or, do things like that to work in a collaborative environment. That's going to require a lot of soft skills, navigating that kind of environment, working with leads and producers and directors, and getting your point across as an artist. Because at the end of the day, you're not just there as a 3D copying machine. You're not just there to turn a concept into a 3D model and go home. A truly great production is really utilizing you as an artist. They want your input as well, your feedback. They want you to bring your side of things to the table. And that includes, bringing your own sensibilities, like the concept that they're based off of. I use this as an example when I'm in week 1, when I'm showing my students the best way to choose a concept for yourself and what makes a good concept. And I always tell them, you want to elevate the concept. You want to take the original concept that was presented to you and bring your own sensibilities to the table, and try to, push it even further and work collaboratively with the art director, with the concept artist, to really, get the most out of that design. And so I'm constantly like, I'll show the original image next to like the final model and show little areas where I kind of took it to another level of adding little details or solving little anatomical problems that weren't present, in the concepts and things like that. And then that's all a part of those soft skills.
Yeah. And I absolutely love the fuel source analogy that you shared earlier as well too. I think it's really apropos. And we're getting a lot of comments in the chat too about people really like that. And I think it's one of the things that you talk about competition. There's healthy competition and there's toxic competition.
Right.
And one of the things that I love, when I'm walking around the Gnomon campus and I'm observing our students in classes, but also working in the labs on their assignments and stuff, there's like this really healthy kind of competition, where like a phrase you hear a lot is like a rising tide raises all ships, right?
Right.
So when
Iron
one
sharpens
person's
iron.
exactly. So I think like this is one of the things I love about our campus is that, you know, I think if a student really gets something and has that like that Neo in the Matrix moment, like I know Kung Fu, like the next thing I want to do is go tell all their friends about it. Right. Like I learned how to do this. Check it out. So everybody's collaborating. And I think there's a big difference between that and what can happen a lot of times is this scarcity mentality of like, well, you know, there's 50 of us students here, but you know, there's only going to be one job available. So I got to like kick all these other people out of the runnings. No. And that's really toxic.
Right.
Yeah, no, 100%. Let's see. We got just a couple moments for a couple more questions. I want to be respectful of your time because I know we're in the middle of your workday. But let's see. We've had a couple of questions. If you're able to speak briefly to this, a couple of questions about income. And you mentioned earlier in your story that, you know, especially when you're working in television, you could be on a project for a while, but it's not like they just keep you on salary when they don't need your role for that project. What could you speak to like multiple streams of income and, you know, setting yourself up for success when you're between projects like that?
Absolutely. So I always got good advice from a mentor of mine when I was in school, and that's always have the next thing lined up. Never put all of your chips in one bag, and you know, because this industry is so quickly moving. You know, one day you might think that, like when I was at Kojima Productions, I mean, Metal Gear had been a series for 30 years. That's like saying there's not going to be any more Mario games ever. You know, you don't even fathom that. So when I was at Kojima, I was like, oh man, I'm set for life. I want to be like, you know, Kojima. He's been around for 30 years and he's still making awesome stuff. And, you know, I'm just going to like, you know, kick back and enjoy this. And after a year, that rug got pulled right up from under me. And so luckily at that point, I just started getting into teaching. I also, previous to that, I was always doing freelance gigs. Anyways, I just always had like some coals in the fire. And so what I'd say is, you know, have your main gig, but always, you know, just have something else that that you can, you know, get an alternate source of income. That's also kind of, you know, using maybe some of the talents you don't get to use at work if you can. For instance, early on, I had some side gigs where I was doing head scan cleanup for different companies in the industry. And so they, you know, they get a scan, and then they needed the textures to be cleaned up, to remove the hairnet and all that, and get it all transferred to their base mesh. And I did that for a little side money, but also that helped me learn how to clean head scans. So when I got to the job at Encore, Supergirl, a lot of the job there when I wasn't making creatures was making digi doubles. And if you guys are familiar with that term, it's digital double. It's basically stuntmen are being kind of phased out, and instead what they'll do is they'll just make an exact replica, 3D replica of an actor. And then when someone's falling off a building or in a car crash or whatever, they'll switch in that digital character. But it has to look exactly like that character, because sometimes, you know, you can actually see their face and stuff. So they would do head scans of all the actors, but they all had to be cleaned up a lot and processed. And so I already had that experience with that side gig. So I already, you know, hit the ground running. I didn't need a lot of ramp up time for that. So that helped me out in that job. That actually helped me get the job, because they asked, you know, do you have any head scan cleanup? That's the reason that they hire so many people from Blur, because they do a lot of that. So that helped me get my shoe in the door. That's why I was the only non-Blur artist there, because I, you know, luckily worked for a company that did scan cleanup for Blur, and so that was, you know, that's kind of helped me out. So gotcha. Yeah, do little side gigs. Whether maybe you're into 3D printing, you can maybe try to start a little 3D printing side hustle. Teaching, you know, it doesn't pay a ton. You know, it's they're definitely not hiring people that are in it just for the money. You got to really know what to do, but that can be another source of income. Start your own class. If you got something to share with the world, you know, go make a Gumroad. There's limitless possibilities. You're literally almost, as an artist, like you have a lot more control over your income, and when you get to a certain level and a certain amount of clientele, you're almost, you know, calling your own shots on how much money that you want to make. It's how much energy you have to put into it. You know, you can definitely pull from that well.
Yeah, you got to apply that same creativity you're putting into your art into your income streams, right? Because it's definitely a lot of creative energy that goes into that. Right. let's see. We're pretty much at time, so I'll close out with one last question. And you know, guys, we did our best to get to as many questions as we could. But I like to ask all of our guests this question in closing, and that is, you know, if you imagine some of those artists out there who are not yet working in the industry, they're really inspired by the stuff that you've shared today and the kind of stuff that you're doing at present. And let's say, you know, 3D is new to them and they're kind of at the beginning of making decisions about how they want to train and how they want to start developing themselves as an artist. What would be one piece of important advice? Not the all definitive advice, but what would be one piece of important advice that you'd like to share with those artists?
I would say just to keep grinding. You know, the pace that you progress is, you know, is different for everyone. Mm-hmm. So it goes back to the competition. Don't compare yourself too heavily to, you know, what the pace that other people are hitting their success, because you don't know what their story is. You don't know how many hours they put into it. At the end of the day, it's all about how many hours you put into it and the quality of those hours. Everyone's coming from somewhere different. My progression was a lot slower than a lot of people around me. I didn't grow up with computers. I didn't have my first computer till I was like 20 years old. I didn't know anything about 3D art or anything computer related. Everything was hand drawn. So there was a longer ramp up for me on that end. But I had more experience with like sculpting and clay. So I was more strong in other areas. So I say just keep making work, even if it's, you know, not relevant. I spent a lot of time just drawing comics and drawing, you know, 2D art, just staying engaged. All of that, it leads in together. And just make sure that every day you're doing something to get closer to that dream. That's something I always ask myself before I went to bed. Like, did I do something today to get closer to that? Did I follow a tutorial? Did I work on a character? Did I network with some people in the industry? What did I do to get closer to that? And it's steps along the way. It took me, 5 years to finally get traction in this industry. And along that way, I just never got discouraged. It just every day, I treated it as a challenge and one step closer to getting to what I wanted to do.
Yeah. Wonderful advice. And I think the kind of resilience you're talking about, doesn't come naturally. We have to develop it. Right. And I think often it's that resilience that, someone who hires you sees in you, and they'll hire you for that as well. And by the way, I got to say, those were some really, really cool sculpts and characters you were showing us earlier. Were those all like personal projects that you've done?
Yeah, those are all just personal pieces.
Really awesome. Yeah.
Glasses too sometimes, but yeah.
So we've been during the course of the stream today, we've been putting up some of the links that you're going to want to follow to go, to follow Damon on. I think we put your ArtStation up there. We put some of your social links, Instagram and YouTube. So definitely go and check out Damon's work and look into it more. But in the meantime, until we can have you back again, and I'm sure I'll see you on campus. Thank you so much for giving us your time today. This has been a wealth of information, and I look forward to the next opportunity we have to talk.
Thanks a lot for having me. Yeah, you guys take it easy and keep grinding.
All right. And then, guys, for those of you who are interested in how Gnomon is training artists for exactly the kind of stuff that we were talking about today, I'd like to invite you to stick around for another 15, 20 minutes. I'm just going to share a brief overview of careers, different types of careers in the entertainment industry, and how Gnomon is training artists and preparing them to start those careers. So I'm just going to get a couple things ready here. We got my screen share up. Just going to go grab that. There we go. Okay, cool. All right. So there's a lot of ground to cover, but we're gonna move quickly because we know that you guys have already paid attention to this awesome interview that we had, but want to supplement that with what Gnomon is. And essentially, we are a 3D art school in Hollywood, California, and we specialize in training artists for careers. And the word careers is super important. We are not just interested in giving you knowledge and then saying, you go figure out how to translate that into a career. We want to prepare you to be industry ready, to start working your first job in the industry as an artist. We've been around for well over 2 decades. Over the years, we've won some fantastic awards, which I won't take the time to get into right now, but I wanted to share all that to let you know that, we've been around for a long time. And we're very good at what we do. And because of that, our alumni, our graduates are going on to work on some really amazing projects. So this is just a sampling of some of the projects out there that Gnomon alumni have worked on. So these folks are going into work on some really, really cool stuff. And these are some of the studios out there that you might be familiar with who are regularly hiring our graduates. You'll see right up here at the top, something that's very important to us is 97% industry placement. And I can even say this was our statistics as of 2019. At 2020, finishing out that year, even during a pandemic year with everything going into lockdown, 94% industry placement. The way that we define that is the percentage of the graduates from our full-time programs that are finding their first industry job doing what they trained to do at Gnomon, and they're finding that within just 6 months of finishing our programs. Usually it's often much less than 6 months. Many of them are going to work in these kind of studios and many, many, many more. There's hundreds and hundreds of studios out there that are fantastic pathways into your career. So I want to really stress that point because we build into what we do at Gnomon. We build into our full-time program to not just teach the art skills and 3D skills, but we are taking the time to teach our students how to put together a demo reel that is going to help them get hired. We're talking to them about how to go through interview processes. We're helping them work on some of those kind of soft skills that Damon was talking about earlier, because we don't want you just to graduate with a bunch of knowledge. We want you to graduate as an industry-ready artist, ready to go out there and start working. So moving forward, what are we essentially teaching? If you could sum up what Gnomon is focusing on teaching people in just one term, that would be digital production. Now, that is referring to an entire pipeline for both film and games. These are going to be skill sets like computer-based visual effects, character and creature design, digital sculpting, which we're looking at today, character and creature animation, environment design, lighting and rendering, matte painting and compositing, game asset creation, game engines, production workflows, and world building. And all of those skills translate into the following careers. So every single position in the pipeline that I'm putting up on the screen right now, these are all unique careers unto themselves in the entertainment industry for digital production artists. And this is representing a wide range of different kinds of jobs. So we talked earlier about, like, a lot of us get started and we're paying more attention to concept art, which is amazing. Concept art is awesome, but that's not the only position that you can get. There's so many other positions out there that are needed for people to get awesome characters into games, or to have a game with amazing environments, or, it's not just one artist that made, the Godzilla that we see in Godzilla versus Kong. These are teams of people working different parts of the pipeline, and there is openings and skill sets that relate to a wide variety of different kinds of passions that artists have. So we're going to look at just 4 different positions really quick to give you an idea of how different these roles can be. And the first position we're going to look at is the character artist. And that is what Damon is. That's what we were talking about today, creating amazing characters and creatures, and then making them ready to be animated and put into a game or in a film. So this artist here in the example is using ZBrush, which we were looking at earlier in the interview. And this is a great piece of software for using traditional sculpting techniques to basically work with 3D digital clay to make these kinds of creatures and characters. These are often artists that started out, drawing a lot of characters and creatures, just like Damon shared in his story. These are artists that are paying attention to things like anatomy and character and creature design, but they're able to take it that next step and actually make the real 3D character creature that's going to be appearing on screen in a game or in a film. Next up, we have effects artists. And in fact, our next Instructor Spotlight is going to be with one of our instructors that teaches visual effects. And I like to affectionately say that these are artists that spend all day in front of their computers blowing things up. These are the artists that are creating kind of these jaw-dropping visual sequences, visual effects sequences we see in film and game animatics, like you can see here from the film Battleship. And because these are so complex, you couldn't go in and animate all of the different moving droplets of water and things like that we're seeing here. You can go in and animate that by hand, like you say would for a character. Instead, these are artists that are a little bit more like wizards and alchemists who are using specialized software to drive physics simulations to animate these different particles and moving pieces. So, these are the real wizards that are, hearing the vision of a director of something that's got to happen. This whole room's going to explode and we want it to look like this. And then they go and use these special simulations, specialized software to create amazing sequences like this. Next up are compositors. Now, the compositor is almost at the end of the digital production pipeline, and they are not the artist that makes all the different pieces you see being put together here into the scene, but they're the one that knows how to weave it all together to create a scene like this. This looks like a real world location, but it's not. So for example, here, the tennis courts in background are 3D models. The tennis players are actors that were filmed in front of green screens. In the foreground, you've got models and props, the buildings, texturing and lighting is put on those. Additional actors are inserted. A final lighting pass is done. And then you animate your camera through it and you wind up with a beautiful scene like this. This is from the film Wolf of Wall Street. And these are great examples of how instead of having to find the perfect real world location to film a shot like this for film, instead directors are able to, just simply say, this is what I'm after, and go to a VFX studio and say, we need you guys to make this. And then that studio is able to save a lot of time and money by creating set extensions or creating scenes like this and using some shot footage in front of green screens and digital models and animation and so forth to completely suspend disbelief so that the audience doesn't even think twice about whether this is a real place or not. And that is really important to the storytelling process. Now, the last position we'll look at, this now takes us all the way to the very beginning of the digital production pipeline, and this is pre-visualization. What a pre-viz artist does is they are working with 3D models and 3D animation, but rather than spending months and months and months just working on one asset or just this one part of a model, they're going in and they're kind of working with everything to tell the big picture for each of the scenes of the film. So this is like creating a moving storyboard or a sketch of the movie before the movie goes further in production. So these are artists that get to work very closely with the director and the cinematographer, and they hear about the kind of shots that need to happen, and then they block it all out. They get to animate the camera. They get to just put what kind of lens is going to be on the camera. How is the shot going to work out? All of those things. So if you are interested in animation and working in 3D, but you're also really interested in big picture storytelling, kind of thinking like a director and a cinematographer, this could be a really awesome career for you. All right, so with just a few examples, those examples that I shared in mind, I want to now talk about how Gnomon is preparing artists to work in all of these different positions that are out there. So this is just a bird's eye perspective of Gnomon's academic offerings. You'll see in the upper left-hand corner, we offer a full Bachelor of Fine Arts degree in digital productions. This is getting training in the entire digital production pipeline and receiving a 4-year degree as a part of that process. Just to the right of that is our certificate program, and this is a 2-year program that is a bit more advanced than a 4-year program. It's a little bit more akin to a master's degree level type of study. And this is typically for students that may already have an art degree that are looking to come to Gnomon and just really fast track into learning 3D. On the bottom row here, you'll see our Foundation in Art and Design, which is a course that is designed to help you build your portfolio at Gnomon. And then lastly, we have many, many, many of our classes from our full-time program that are offered as individual courses. So moving forward, let's take a closer look at our Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. This is a fully accredited 4-year program. Accreditation means that, of course, things like financial aid, a lot of these usual suspects when it comes to grants and stuff like that are going to be options for you. It's going to be full-time on our campus, and I'm very excited to say that we are getting ready for the start of the fall term, which is going to be completely excuse me, on campus at Gnomon. So we're very excited to be able to have all of our students come back to campus. And as a part of that full-time program for 4 years, you're going to have, you can, simply just go through the program, or you can choose, in addition, one of 2 optional concentrations. And these are concentrations that are going to let you focus a little bit more on one of 2 different areas should you choose to do that. The first is going to be game art, which of course relates to what we were talking about today. And that is going to take all of the digital production pipeline and teach you those disciplines as they relate specifically to working within game engines. Those are all the skills that are going to help you get employed in a game studio. The other concentration is visual effects. And if you choose that concentration while in the 4-year program, it's going to take some of our more advanced VFX classes that have traditionally only been a part of our 2-year certificate program and make those as optional classes for you to take while you're taking the 4-year. So those concentrations give you that ability to hone in a little bit further and develop those specific skill sets. Now, everybody who goes through the BFA program at Gnomon is going to get what we call a 3D generalist skill set. What that means is, just as we were talking about earlier today, you're going to learn the entire pipeline. And that's going to make you a super valuable hire at a studio, because you may be just getting hired for the thing that you're particularly interested in doing. Let's say that's animation, but because you understand modeling, and you understand, rigging, and you understand what comes after you in the pipeline, you're going to be able to work as a much more valuable team member. Now, on top of getting training in the entire digital production pipeline in your last 4 terms at Gnomon, you also then get to pick out 4 additional electives, which at that point, towards the end of the program, it's valuable because you've been exposed to everything, and now you get to make a much more educated decision about, hey, this is the area that I really want to build extra skills in, because this is what I want to do when I go out there and start working. So yeah, the BFA is a fantastic way of becoming industry ready to start your career and get a college degree while you're getting that training. We have a rolling admission at Gnomon, which means it's not just about applying for the fall. You can apply in the fall, or start in the winter, or start in the spring, or in the summer terms. I'll talk to you in just a bit about how you can pursue that if you're interested in learning about applying to our programs. And the majority of students at Gnomon in the 4-year program choose to not take a break during the summer term, but to stay on for the summer term each year that they're in the program, which allows them to finish in 3 years instead of 4. All right, moving forward, just talking briefly about our 2-year certificate program. As I mentioned, this is a bit more advanced. It's a little bit more intense, higher level training. It is designed for perhaps students who already have a degree from another school that are looking to get into Gnomon to really focus on digital production in addition. It is fully accredited. It's full-time on our campus. And it's really designed to be a very intensive program to build foundational 3D skills before then choosing an area of emphasized study. And these would be areas of emphasis like animation, or it could be modeling and texturing, or it could be visual effects, or games, and so forth. As I said, this is, even though it's only 2 years, it's a little bit more like a master's degree level type of study as compared to the Bachelor of Fine Arts program. Now, the foundation in art and design is something that is really exciting in terms of artists that really want to do this, but might need a little bit more preparation. They might need to take a little bit more time to prepare a portfolio to apply to one of those 2 full-time programs. The foundation does not require a portfolio to apply. This is something you simply talk with admissions about, and you enroll in the foundation through them. And this is up to 1 year. So it's going to be a 4-term course. You don't have to stay in it for the entire year. There are some students that get started in it, and through working with admissions feels that they're then ready to apply to a full-time program from there. But this is designed to get you in and get you learning some of those foundational skills, things like figure drawing, anatomy for artists, perspective, color and light theory. And then you'll also get into some great design classes like vehicle and mech design, character design, and environment design. And while you're learning this stuff, really, it's a great way to learn from the people teaching at Gnomon how to prepare those skill sets and put together a portfolio that will help you get accepted into Gnomon. And again, you can talk with our advisors more about that if that's something that is of interest to you. And lastly, I'll just mention the individual classes at Gnomon. This is over 70 of our courses that are a part of our full-time programs are also offered as individual classes. And these are essentially a total of 30 hours of class time spread out over 10 weeks. That's 3 hours a week. Excuse me. Some of these classes have online options, And these are going to be standalone courses that cover a wide variety of subjects within film, game, and visual effects production. We also have a lot of industry professionals from studios choosing to come in and take individual classes at Gnomon as a way of expanding their skill sets and to continue to grow as a professional. All right, so with all these things in mind, how do you get access to them? Who do you talk to? How do you start preparing? And really, the best thing that you can do at Gnomon is to talk to one of our admissions advisors. And here they are. This is our team of admissions advisors at Gnomon. They're all artists themselves. They can offer professional critique and feedback on your artwork. And what they are designed to do is to be the front line, the very first person you talk to who is going to help you prepare to apply. So a lot of art school experiences, admissions are the people you talk to after you've gotten everything ready. You submit that to them, and then you wait for them to tell you later if you get in or not. In Gnomon, we don't do it that way. We do things very differently. Start talking to these guys right away. You can show them any artwork that you're working on, anything that you've created. Even if you don't feel that you have a polished portfolio put together, you just start talking with them about what you're interested in, what you'd like to do at Gnomon, and share your artwork with them. And what they will do is they will actually coach you and help you know areas that you need to expand on or perhaps improve or build, and how to put together that portfolio that you're going to use to apply. They'll also be able to answer questions about financial aid and other aspects of the application process, classes, and so forth. So these guys really are your best friends. And the reason why we do it that way is we want to take all the guesswork out. I talk to a lot of people that are interested in Gnomon, and I get a lot of the same questions, which is, how do I know if I'm good enough? How do I know what needs to be in my portfolio? Like, it feels like a big risk. Like, I just don't know. It's a lot of guessing. And that's why our advisors do what they do. We want to take the guesswork out of it. So definitely utilize that. Even if you're in high school and you might not be applying to Gnomon for a couple of years, you can reach out to them today and start getting that feedback and use the remainder of your time in high school or in community college before you transfer to be working on that portfolio and to continue to go back and forth with them, getting that coaching and mentorship. So my colleague Xander, who you can see actually right here on the screen, is going to be dropping a link in the chat that you can use to get one of our advisors to reach out to you. If you follow that link, provide your information, that's just going to help us reach out. We're not going to try to call you up at dinner time for the rest of your life. We're not going to be trying to sell you things. This is just to help us get in touch with you. And then I'd suggest that after you reach out, by filling out that contact card, just pay attention to your email and your spam folder, because sometimes, emails from places you haven't received an email yet from can get routed there. But we definitely want to make sure that you can get in touch and get some of that mentorship that you're looking for. All right. So I'll just mention, this is the campus slide, and we opened the stream today with our campus reel, which we'll also be closing the stream with in just a few moments if you want to get a good look at the Gnomon campus. But what I will say about our campus, especially with now the fall term being totally open again on campus, the Gnomon campus is a community. It's not just a bunch of labs. It's not just a bunch of classes. This is a community of artists where you're getting excellent training from industry artists, but you've also got, industry standard hardware and software in our 9 digital labs that are open 7 days a week, from the morning well into midnight every day. This becomes your place where you get to work on your work, and you get to do it collaboratively together with your peers at the school. At the campus, we also hold some really awesome events and live streams. So today being also part of that event programming. But with campus reopening, we're looking forward to having live events again on campus. And, these have been some really, really cool events with, the creators and studios behind some of our favorite films and games, as you can see here. And these events are always open and free to the public. So even if you're not a Gnomon student, you can just go through the Gnomon website and the links to RSVP for our events and show up. As well, of course, our live streams you can always catch, or go look at the video on demand on our Twitch and YouTube channels. We have well over 100 different streams and events that have already been pre-recorded there. These are amazing resources. What our live events do for our Gnomon students is it puts you in proximity to the studios, the art directors, and the artists that are doing the stuff that you want to do while you're learning. So this helps us to make Gnomon a hub where you're getting training, but you're also networking, and you're building those relationships, and you're hearing from the industry about the industry. So that really augments the educational experience. All right. So with that, I just simply want to say thank you so much for tuning into the stream today. Don't forget that we have continued programming right here on our channel. The next Instructor Spotlight is going to be Friday, September 17th, the same time, 11 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. And that is going to be an Instructor Spotlight about visual effects for film and television. We are going to be speaking with instructor Martin Hall, and forthcoming very soon. We're going to have some promotionals for that about on social media. That event will be posted on our website. And I should also say every Wednesday from 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time until 5 p.m., we have the Gnomon Art Jam. And this is a 3-hour session where you get to hang. Lately, it's been our founder, Alex Alvarez, who's been hosting the stream for that. And he has been working in Unreal Engine. He just finished a recent Unreal Fellowship, and he's been showcasing a project that he did as a part of that fellowship, as well as continuing to build with it. And you get to see some of his process and his pipeline of doing sculpts and working with 3D assets and putting them together into some really compelling scenes in Unreal Engine. So definitely tune into that on Wednesday at 2 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. But in the meantime, I want to say thank you. This is Adam Hartel, your host, saying continue to be creative, stay safe, and I hope to see you on the Gnomon campus in the near future. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.